Julie Tillman, and today I'm going to be working on an altered playing card. This is my second card for the Shinuki Art Full Deck Challenge number 4. The prompts I'll be working with are bird, gold, stencil with texture paste, black splatter, and orange. So I decided on a rusty orange, and I'm going to pair it with a dusty blue and a really light speckled egg color combination. I really hope you enjoy watching this process. I did speed the video up about 1.5 times just to keep things a little bit on the shorter side. So just grab a cup of something you love and let's dive in. So I have my Canasta card that I'll be working with, and I'm going to start out with a little gesso just to prepare the card to take some different mediums. I have my trusty palette out this week, so hopefully I can contain things if my paint glops out. I also have a sheet of watercolor paper just below my project that I will be using as my pickup sheet. I think just having a little pickup sheet below is just the perfect way to kind of break a blank page. So like when I'm done, I'll have the start to another mixed media project, and I didn't have to think too much about breaking that white page. So I'm just going in here with layers of gesso, and then I'm just going to kind of scrape off the edges of the card as well as spread around that extra gesso that's on my paper already. So I used my heat tool and dried that just a little bit, and now I'm going back in with some gesso with a foam brush. And I love the foam brush because you can kind of dab it on, just dab the gesso on, and it gives kind of like a crackle texture to the surface. So it's a really a fun way to get that crackle effect. Okay, so I did a little bit of drying, and I think it's now dry enough to start my ink blending. I have some On the Lake um, ink from Catherine Pooler that's a dye ink, and then I have some Distress Oxide that is a pigment dye hybrid. And so I'm going to go in with the dye ink first so that I don't contaminate this ink pad with the oxide pad. So I'm just doing the blue first, and I added a little bit more to that play sheet. And then I'm going to go in with speckled egg. And this is a really light blue that I just love this color. It's one of my favorite colors. So, and it's just going to blend really smoothly on that gesso. And then I'm pulling in Rusty Hinge as my orange. And I don't want to go too dark with this. I just want that rusty hinge to add a hint of color, and then a little over around on both edges. Now I want some deeper blue, so I'm going to go in with this peacock feathers spray, and I'm just going to let that drip down a little. And I like that movement that the flow of the water gives. Just those little drips are so fun. And now I'm just spritzing with water to activate that oxide, and I just love those speckles. And it's time to do a little drying. And then I'm just going to blot off any excess ink with a paper towel, just so that I have a really dry surface. And then I'm going to go in with some more of that speckled egg ink. I really like this green that's happening where the colors meet. This process is just a whole lot of building up layers until you get the effect you're going for. So I'm just going to add more speckled egg and spritz some more. Add some of that peacock feathers, spritz some more, then heat dry and repeat the process. So I'm just kind of tipping the card back and forth to get the water and the ink to move a little bit. And then I just dried that with my heat gun, and I'm going to go in with a little bit more of that peacock feathers. And I'll just tip it around different directions so that I can get the look that I'm going for, and add a few more speckles with the spritz, and we'll hit it with the heat tool again. And now I think I want a little more contrast of dark and light, so I'm going to pull in some more gesso. I'm just going to bring that back in to kind of lighten up the card. And I'm not really liking the way the orange looked, so I'm just going to kind of spread that around with the foam brush. Since the gesso and the inks are both water reactive, they're going to blend a little bit as I do this, and I'm really not mad at it. Like, just lightening the color is great. So I'm just going to dab on some more and keep lightening that to give just another layer of depth to this card. I just really kind of want to get these blues set the way I want them before I go back in with that Rusty Hinge. So after drying that a bit more, I decided that I wanted a little bit of a darker look to this to coordinate with the grayish colors on the bird. So there's kind of a gray and the blue color. I'm looking for hickory smoke, but I couldn't find it. So I'm going to go with scorched timber. Even though it's a brown ink, it has a really dark tinge that reads like a grayish black. So I think it'll work well with these colors. I'm going to kind of be concentrated about how I add it. So I pulled out a paintbrush and I'm just adding a little to the palette and then kind of plopping it on with my brush that is like, I put a good amount of water on my brush so that it would move around really easily. And I also sprayed just a little bit of water on that card so that the ink would flow a little easier. And I'm going to add some flecks with that. And since the water is still wet on the card, that's going to diffuse a little bit so that once it is dry, you see that it has diffused. And I really love that cloudy look. And now I'm going to go in with some of the darker blue. I've got that peacock feathers there, and I'm just adding it in concentrated areas with that paintbrush, just the way I did the brown. And now I'm just going to pull out the heat tool again and give that a dry. And I just love the way that this is drying. It's not completely dry and things are moving still a little bit more than I like. So I think next time I use Distress Oxides on a card, I'm going to start with like a paper collage layer instead of a layer of gesso. So to try and preserve that layer of color without having it mix too much with whatever I'm going to put on next, I am just using a little dauber to add some micro glaze. This is Distress Micro Glaze, and it's just like a little barrier that kind of sets your inks. And I always heat dry it afterwards because I'm just worried that it's not going to set. So I like to be sure about it. And now I'm going to go in with a stencil and some Roar Lunar Texture Paste, but unfortunately I am out of frame for this, but I'm just adding it with a palette knife and it's really easy, and I just absolutely love the way it looks. Just like that rusty color just really pops. So now it's time to bring in some stamping for a little bit of texture, and I picked out that stamp from a Tim Holtz stamp set, and I'm going to pull in some black archival ink. So I'm just inking up that stamp, and then I don't want it to be too dark, so I'm going to stamp off so that I can just stamp a second generation stamping and get a lighter look and feel when I stamp that. And then I'm going to go in again, and I'm going to go in full strength down at the bottom and try not to get any on that texture paste. I think it's mostly dry, but you never know. So I'll just give that a little dry to heat set the ink. And then now I am going in with a white StazOn opaque white ink, and I am just loving how that looks. That was just what I was looking for, just a little whiteness, and using the same stamp but different parts of it, so it gives a nice little texture to the background. All right, so I really like the way this is shaping up after it was dry. And I think I'm going to go in with a darker color here. And first I'm just going to add some water. I just want some darker ink going around the edges of that crackle paste. So I'm adding the water, and then I'm realizing as I'm doing it that ink is just going to bead up on that microglaze. So as I finished drying this, I realized that I just kind of actually lifted some of the color. So I didn't get the darkness that I wanted, but I actually really like the way it turned out. And that's kind of the beauty of mixed media. So now I'm going to add a little Versamark to the edges. It's just like a clear watermark ink, and I'm just swiping that lightly on the edges of those feathers. I want to do some like gilded feathers. So I'm pulling out some gold embossing powder, and I have a little coffee filter there to catch my excess. And I'm just going to sprinkle that onto those feathers. I don't want things to look too uniform, so I'm going to pull out a dry brush and wipe off a hint of that powder here and there. So we have some gorgeous gold-tipped feathers. So once I have done that, we're going to pull in the embossing tool and do the magical embossing. And I just love the way these wings turn out. It was just exactly how I envisioned it in my mind. That gold is just stunning against the backdrop there with the scorched timber. You've just got to try golden feathers on your next bird. I'm just saying. So now I'm going to move on to some gold marks. So I'm using a Posca gold pen, and I just primed it over on my paper to make sure it worked. And then I'm just adding little marks, nothing fancy, just a little bit of extra texture on that background. And while I was doing that, I realized that I really wanted some gold speckles or flecks. And I was actually thinking of gilding flakes, but I couldn't find any gold in my stash. So I'm going in with some foundry wax. And this needs to be heat set to activate it, or it will just dry as a powder and flake off. So it doesn't look super interesting when you're flicking it on, but once you use the heat tool to heat set it, it just like really sparkles and kind of pops a little bit off the page. So I'm just finishing up and then I'll heat set this. So now that that is set, I'm just going to take a blending tool and some scorched timber distress ink and just rub that around the edges of my bird just to darken it up. And I'm also going to flick that around the edges, just kind of adding a little vignette to the outside of my card, just darkening up the edges just a little bit. So here's a little closer look at what our card looks like right now. And I am going to now add in some fiber. And I just picked out a little piece of fiber from my stash. And I think I'm going to put it underneath the bird, but I want it to be a little different. It needs something. So I decided to dye it. So I'm just going to spray a little bit of that Rusty Hinge spray into my little palette there. And I'm using a tweezer to kind of move the fibers around and try to get them all coated with that ink. So I'm just trying to make sure I get all the spots covered as well as I can. It's okay if it's not perfectly colored. I just want a good amount of color. And then I'm going to drag that on my play paper, just dragging it around, getting some organic movement and just playing a little bit. And I'm going to spread that out so that I can see any spots that I need to go in with a paintbrush and just add a little bit of spot of the color with the brush. And then I'm going to dry that. Okay, so that's pretty dry now, and I'm pretty inky, so I guess that's a sign of a good day in the craft room. Let's see, I'm thinking if I layer the fiber behind the bird, so I'm just kind of rolling it up, and then at this point I remembered that one of my prompts is black splatter. So I'm pulling out some black calligraphy ink and a fan brush, and I'm just going to tap that on, just splatter to my little heart's content, and then I will give it a little dry. So I was kind of thinking maybe I need a little strip of paper or something. So I just got this vintage music book at the Creative Reuse shop the other day, and I think it might be just the perfect thing to tear a little strip off of and add behind my bird and the fiber. So I'm just going to tear off some of those edges so it doesn't look perfectly uniform, and I'll be putting it down with some collage medium. So I'm just going to add that collage medium with a little brush to my piece of paper. And when you're working with collage medium, the best thing to do is to make sure that there is ink, or not ink, but adhesive. The collage medium is below and above. So you want a good coating on both sides of the paper so that it definitely adheres and doesn't bubble up. And I'm just doing the whole surface of the card so that it has a nice finish and everything is uniform. And I got a little smudging there with the scorched timber, so I just blotted off a little bit of it. And then it's drying time again. So I was thinking I want to add some postage stamp to this, and this card is number 2, and I already covered up my number 2 on my card, so I thought I would bring back the 2 with this postage stamp. So I'm just going to put it on the side and snip off that excess, and then I'm going to add some collage medium over the top of it so that it sticks well. So while I'm adding this, I decide that I want a few more splatters, and I think I want some more gold. So I'm going to pull out some more of that foundry wax and add some more splatters. And then it's time for another heat set. So the card is pretty dry now, and I'm going to just figure out how to position the birds and the fiber and how I just want things to lay. And I think I want that bird just to look like it's kind of taking flight off of that postage stamp. And so now I am a card maker at heart, so I don't feel like anything's finished unless I have a sentiment. So I am looking through them, and I landed on this contented spirit sticker, and it just like really sums up how I feel about mixed media and how I feel when I'm creating. It's just a contented spirit, and so I thought that was perfect. And I think I'm going to pull out some Fabri-Tac to glue this fiber down. It's just a really good permanent adhesive that's good for fabrics and fibers and such. And it's also easy to still move things when it's wet. So I'm just going to spread that fiber out as much as I can to kind of get the look that I'm going for. And I'm auditioning that bird to make sure I get a large enough area covered with the fiber. And then I'm also going to lay that bird down with some Fabri-Tac. And I want a good layer of that on the back of the bird so I can press it down into that fiber and it will stay. So I'm just pressing that down really firmly, and then I'm going to grab a magnet and just set that on top of that for it to dry. So I let that dry for a little bit, and now I am deciding where I want that contented spirit sentiment to go. And I decided right down under the bird, and it is a sticker, but I still want it to make sure that the adhesive sticks. So I'm just going to coat it with a layer of that collage medium. So I just want that to pop a little bit more. So I am going in with a water-soluble pencil that I have dipped in my paint water, and I am just going to outline that sentiment and then do a nice outline all around the edges of the card, and as needed, I'm just redipping that pencil in water and bringing it back to get the edges. I just like that nice framing around the card. And then I'm going to soften out those edges once I get all the pencil down. So to soften those edges, I'm just going to grab a paintbrush, and it's a wet paintbrush, and I'm just going to kind of dab in softly around where that pencil mark is, and it just kind of softens the edges, lets it run just a little bit. And if I want more water, I can add more water to make it flow a little bit more, but it just gives that like smudgy, grungy kind of look. And I think I got a little bit more than I wanted on that sentiment. So I just went in with a little bit of water on my paintbrush and dabbed that off. And then I'm just going to add a little bit more softening around the sentiment to finish that off. So what do you think of this project? I'm really loving the fiber. As far as prompts, we've got our fiber, we have orange, we have a bird, we have black splatter, and we have the texture paste through a stencil. So I think we achieved what we were looking for. I hope you've enjoyed this process as much as I have. If you've stuck it out to the end, I'd love for you to smash that like button and put a little heart in the comments. Thank you so much for stopping by, and I'll catch you on the next one.